So now that you've been on the apartment search and hopefully you found yourself your dream apartment, it is time to understand that rental contract. Once you have agreed on which apartment you would like or which house you would like to rent, your next step is going to be meeting with the landlord to go over that rental contract. But because we're expats and because we're English speaking, it only makes sense that we're a little hesitant to sign off on documents. And when it's something so big as signing a rental contract that you want to make sure has been filled out and completed 100% correctly. So that's what we're going to go through right now in today's module so that you can see exactly what needs to be included, what's not included in a contract, and what you can expect. So what actually makes a contract valid? Well, it is quite easy for landlords to actually formulate this rental contract. There are so many pre-formulated contracts that can just be purchased online on a different landlord association. I've used Haus und Grund before, but there's other places that you can buy these pre-formulated forms. A contract could be really, really thick. It could also be super thin, just so that you know not to expect one or the other. Just depends on whether or not they've generated that from a pre-formulated package, which then usually means that the rental contract tends to look a little bit longer, or it could be smaller if it's something that they've formulated themselves. So although many landlords might have this pre-formulated rental contract, which in German is called a Mietvertrag, what is very important is that the contract needs to include the following. Don't be overwhelmed. It's going to look like a lot, but you just need to make sure that this is all included in your contract. The name of the tenant, i.e. yourself and whoever you're deciding to live with, the name of the landlord, the address that you're moving into, your actual move-in date, a list of exactly what is being rented, if they're giving you a cellar, any furnishings included in the apartment, because it might also be a furnished apartment. Of course, what also needs to be included is the cost of your rent per month, and that includes, as we've discussed before, both that cold rent and then with the Nebenkosten or the add-ons. And these Nebenkosten, which could be the chimney cleaning or splitting the electricity bill in the hallway or any cleaning services that they might have, every single one of these points needs to be mentioned in your rental contract. They actually need to break it down so that you can see exactly what it is that you're paying for. What is very important is that they include how much you are actually providing as a security deposit. I've mentioned in the last module that you often pay first and last month's rent, but as we saw when we went through and looked at different apartments on Immobilien Scout, you might have also noticed that they requested 3 months rent. Don't be alarmed, this is quite common. I would say usually they ask between 1 to 3, sometimes 4 months rent, just depends on who your landlord is. As long as this is written down in your contract, you do not need to worry, because all of that money that has been included in the contract, you will be getting back as long as the apartment is in pristine condition when you leave it. They also need to write down how you actually paid that deposit. In Germany here, we often run the deposit as a direct bank transfer. So now that you've got your bank set up, you can go ahead and send that via bank transfer so that they have that in the account, and they will hold that in their rental account until you leave the apartment in order for them to send it back to you. There are very strict rules in Germany that allow or not allow landlords to increase the rent. If this is something that is possible and might be an option for the landlord in the future, they will need to mention this in the contract. They also need to make sure that they're mentioning the percentage of the increase. They can't just throw in any random number here. There are laws around how much you can actually increase the rent per year. If there is one point that tenants and landlords argue about at the end of a rental contract, it is how you were actually given the apartment in the first place. So in Germany, you won't always get an apartment with perfectly white walls and a beautiful floor and everything brand new and modernized. You can actually get quite a dingy apartment if you're wanting to save some money. So they are still out there, and that needs to be documented in your rental contract. If you see, for example, that the windows are a little bit busted, or that there's a scratch in the bathtub, or there's something that's not working that hopefully they'll fix later on, this all needs to be mentioned in that contract, because after you move out, these are the things that they can come back to you on and say, listen, my tenant broke this, this and this, so they need to pay for it, so we're going to take it out of their deposit, or Kaution as they say in German. I also mentioned in the last module that it is very popular that if the walls have been painted beforehand, oftentimes you are going to be required to paint it when you leave. That is included in my contract. It is also often included in all of the pre-formulated rental agreements, so this is very common here in Germany. It's not always the case. If they don't specify it in the rental contract, you do not have to make sure that you paint those walls when you leave. But if they're offering you an apartment that hasn't been painted because they assume that you're going to want to paint it perhaps in a different color, then you also don't have to paint it upon departure. Again, they could perhaps give you a non-painted apartment and then say you have to paint it white again when you leave. So just be wary of this and just make sure that you're going through the rental contract and that all of these things that we mentioned here are included. It sounds like a lot, but you could include all of this on one piece of paper, so the rental contract doesn't have to be a huge stack. If it is rather big, they're usually just mentioning what different shared amenities do you have, if you're allowed any animals in the building, so on and so forth. These things aren't as important as the ones we mentioned today. Legally, these all have to be included in your rental contract. So the biggest question is, what is not going to be included in your rental contract? What is not going to be included in that Nebenkosten or your Warmmiete, your warm rent? There are things that aren't included, and yes, we did mention that electricity and internet are not included in your rent unless this has been otherwise stated in your rental contract. You are going to have to set this up yourself. We are going to set this up together, as you know, so stay tuned. But we're going to go through a little bit more about these rental contracts so that you fully understand it and that we are prepared to sign a contract. This is probably going to be new to you. In Germany, there is a radio and television licensing fee, which is called the Rundfunkbeitrag, and I'm going to include a link below so you can check it out and understand and perhaps copy and paste anything you want from that website over onto Google Translate so that you can better understand it. But this fee is not included. This broadcast is a state-funded television fee and radio fee, and therefore every single resident in Germany by law is required to pay for this. There are exceptions, like for example, if you're not employed and you're registered with the job center, you don't necessarily have to pay for it, but you do have to fill out a form in order to exempt yourself from this fee. On average, per household or per apartment, you're going to be paying about $17.98. This could change, it just depends, but about 15 to 20 euros per month for this licensing fee. So these channels on TV and radio are actually commercial free. They're also really interesting if you give them a chance. If you want to hop on the TV and learn a bit of German, they have some amazing history and nature programs that are completely and entirely commercial free. And so this is what you're paying for. It doesn't matter if you don't have a TV in your house, if you're not using radio, every single household is required to pay this. I also know that there are a lot of expats and internationals who come here for a couple years, get backdated, because it doesn't matter whether you register with the Rundfunkbeitrag at the beginning when you move here. What matters is that they will request you send your registration documents to them, which has the date of when you moved to Germany. So you will be charged and backtracked for the missing payments that you have not yet sent them. Some expats decide to leave Germany after a few years and just entirely ignore this. I wouldn't recommend it because you might have issues getting back into the country. Any additional information you can find on rundfunkbeitrag.de, again, linked below so that you can find more information there. So we probably shouldn't need to talk about this right now since you're looking at getting into a contract, but it's just a few pointers that I'd like to make, because if you're only planning on coming here for a couple years, well then this course is also going to be able to help you if you need to leave a contract. It might also help because maybe you want to move into an apartment for the first few months because you're looking for that dream apartment, and then you're going to have to know how exactly you are able to leave a contract. So here in Germany, rental contracts can usually only be terminated within a minimum of 3 months notice unless they've stated otherwise in that contract. So you have to tell them 3 months in advance if you would like to leave your apartment. And as I've mentioned before, if you would like to leave your contract early, you might have a nice landlord who allows you to look for somebody else to fill your spot in that apartment. This is a very important one to know, and these are only 3 points, so it's not that easy to forget them. But what you definitely absolutely need to know is that your termination needs to be provided in a formal letter letting your landlord know that you will be vacating the premise, and make sure that you include the date of the letter and your intended move out date, so 3 months in advance. I say this because a word of mouth or a text message is not a legal way to terminate your contract, and your landlord can come back and say, sorry, it was not a formal agreement. Until I get that letter from you, you are going to have to live here for another 3 months, or you're just going to have to pay the rent even if you don't want to live here. So you don't want to get stuck in this situation. It is a common situation. So just make sure that you do this, and you don't have to fill out this form on your own. There are so many pre-formulated templates online that you can find, and I will include a link below as well if for some reason you need that. But the letter is a very short and easy, simple to understand letter in German that lets them know that you will be moving out. So we've talked about legal support before, and you might not need this, and I really hope that you don't need it, but there can often be issues between landlords and tenants in Germany. I don't know why, it just happens sometimes, and that's why they have this tenant association, which in Germany is known as Mieterbund, and the website is mieterbund.de, and I will include that below as well. So I'm on the homepage of mieterbund.de, and you can see here this is the Deutscher Mieterbund, and so you're going to look for Beratung, which is a consultation. So you click here, and then this is where you're going to look. You're going to look for a Mieterverein vor Ort, which is basically a tenant association or a tenant club in a particular city. So when you click on that, you can actually punch in your postal code or zip code and then click search. This is a Düsseldorf postal code or zip code, so I'm getting information here of which one is closest to me. And this is the Mieterverein Düsseldorf. You can either call them right from here or email them right from here, or you can go to their website. This is the Mieterverein or Mieterbund that is in partner with the Deutscher Mieterbund, but is targeted for the people of Düsseldorf. As I mentioned, there are different ways that you can approach the situation. You can actually become a member of the Mieterverein Düsseldorf. And if you click on Mitglied werden and just scroll down, it is going to tell you how much it costs annually to be a part of their membership. So this is going to be 66 euros a year. If you want to be a part of this from the get-go, then you can click Jetzt Mitglied werden, and you can do this before you even get your rental contract, just to make sure that everything is safe and that everything is correct. You can take your rental contract to this association, ask if everything looks good, ask if you should sign it. You can go to them with any questions you have. You can ask them, do I legally have to paint the wall? Or my tenant's complaining about us being noisy even though we're not that noisy, what do I do? And they will give you all of the answers that you need and all of the legal advice that you need. So this is very, very helpful. So I hope that showing this to you has given you a better understanding of what you can expect. You know what needs to be included in that rental contract, and if you have any doubts whatsoever, you can join one of these clubs for a very affordable price, and it is often worth your money.